Episode 5, Chapter 1 Ending. Old Memories. The Toa of Water woke up confused and with blurred-eyed. She couldn't remember what happened and who had stunned her. She couldn't even recognize the place where she was. It seemed to be a kind of control room inside some airship. Nevertheless, some aspects seemed familiar to her, including the contraptions, which reminded her of those of the metro shuttles. She also saw some individuals talking to each other, until at some point she lost consciousness again and fainted. She woke up, but noticed that she was stuck with handcuffs that blood colored her limbs. Around her, everything was dark, and a small light placed above her illuminated the room slightly. Suddenly, an individual with golden armor approached. "What is your name, Toa? Where are your fellows?" he asked with an authoritarian voice. Nokama didn't know what to say. She didn't remember that the Hero Factory had declared war on her people or vice versa. After a few seconds of silence, the Toa told him she knew nothing about it and asked why they had kidnapped her. "Are you kidding me? You know better than I that there's a war out there and that your people started exterminating us with no reason." Nokama was stunned. "Our people attacking yours? But what happened? I don't know anything about it." "What? You don't know what happened? I don't believe you," Roka said as he left the room. "We'll talk when you have clearer ideas." Meanwhile, Vakama and Nuju saw a city in the distance. Vakama was convinced it was Ahinui. "We're finally back home," he thought. "I just hope everyone's okay." Before arriving in the city, they camped in the night, and this time Vakama had a vision completely different from the others. He still woke up in that strange liquid, with the usual cold wind blowing against him. Outside, on the pillars, there were two flecks of extinguished red color. Both symbolized the disturbing stare of a mask, the Ignika. At a certain point, however, a large cross was carved as if by magic on the pillars of the temple, which were shattered suddenly. The Toa managed to glimpse three shadows observing him unusually. They were different from each other. The two on the sides were of different height, and their eyes were yellow, like the central one, higher than the others, and it held in its hand the severed head of Vakama. Suddenly, the same voice that he heard in the visions said to him, "It's too late." "Come with me," said Mazeka. "It's no longer safe here." The spy of the Order of Matanui led them into a cave beyond the desert hills. There they found Topduk, who was impressed by their presence. "Toa Metru? But how is that possible?" "What do you mean?" asked Onowa. "Only he will give them an adequate explanation," Mazeka said in an assuring voice. "Topduk, what's going on? Why are we at war against the Hero Factory?" Onowa asked. The two members of the Order looked at each other in disbelief. "Don't you know? But where were you when it all happened?" Topduk replied with a concerned look, certainly not a gesture from someone like him. The two Toa told him that they didn't understand what he was talking about. "We don't even remember how we found ourselves in that temple." Topduk sighed. "Alright then. I'm afraid I have to explain to you what happened that day, so you'll understand all the horror you've seen so far." In the Hero Factory airship, Raka resumed the conversation with Nokama, asking more about her story. Nokama then began to tell him about their whole life, from when she was Matoran to when she became Toa and finally Turaga. In the hours of trouble for the return to the HQ, where the Toa would have undergone further questioning, the entire story of the Matanui generation was summarized, along with his latest deed. The Golden Hero was impressed by the events and virtues that were handed down by this great spirit. This sense of unity, duty, and destiny. The heroes also followed those ideals in a way. However, his intentions were different. While he was listening to the story of Nakama, he would have liked to know if in the past she had contacts with some individuals related to the same one that appeared years ago at the HQ. Now it's your turn. You must tell me what has happened in all this time, and for what reasons the war between our people has broken out. You seriously don't know? Nakama denied it, and told him that she barely remembered what happened just before her awakening in that temple. Rokan then decided to explain to her what happened, starting from the day when the HQ was attacked. And so, both Top Dog and Roka began to witness their experiences. I wasn't at the HQ that day, but with a special team tasked with finding the enemy and killing it. Along with us, there was another team. During the night, the two recon groups exploited the Black Spike Mountains as cover. On their way, however, they find no guards to guard the path. For this reason, Fortis invited everyone to be cautious. Once we arrived at the assigned position, we got in touch with the other team, but no one answered. We were waiting for an answer at any moment, but nothing happened. Suddenly the radio reactivated, and from the transmitter leaked only the cries of Nigel heroes, accompanied by frightening sounds. We received a call from Alpha Leader, who ordered us to return immediately with the other soldiers of our checkpoint. The HQ on Skrull River was under attack. A few hours before, the green creature told the dozens of team leaders that its brothers and it were looking for something. I know you have it. There's no doubt about it. The Spear of Rerax. Give it to me. Alpha Leader, what do we do? One of the soldiers asked. Without thinking, Stormer ordered to open fire, and the soldiers did it, but the creature disappeared into thin air. As a reaction, hundreds of monstrous beings attacked the building from the outside with heavy weapons and war machines. We heard the shots from afar and arrived as soon as possible. When we arrived, hundreds of corps were gathered on the battlefield. The opposing army was equipped with warriors over your size, Toa. And then what happened? Nakama asked. Unfortunately, I got hit on the head and lost consciousness during the battle. However, from what I was told, we were able to repel the attack with the help of the hero jets, which had remained in orbit around the planet. Top Duke instead revealed the harder truth. Their people, according to the former member of the Order of Matanui, were also attacked, but in their case the offensive was more accentuated. It happened the day the village of Equinox and Tazara were attacked. That was the last great event that the former Turaga of the ancient Metronui, now Toa, remembered with some difficulty. That day, Top Dog was with Aria and Orcam and saw the enemy in the eyes for the first time. As you well know, Equinox was assigned to me, Top Dog began. My job was to replace Matoro, otherwise there were no Toa or any individuals with enough experience. So Herix asked me to fill that role and I accepted. We then joined the army of Orcam in the village of Tazara. Given the proximity of Roxus, especially for the inhabitants of Tio Nui, we asked Dume and Helrix to increase the guards and obtain more protodermis to be used for the manufacture of war machines and armor strongholds in the correspondence of the mountains. In this way, we could have had a better view of the territory, and at the same time, we could attack every single threat from distance. At first, during the early years of War Nui's life, we were subjected to massive attacks by Tuma and his henchmen. The attacks spread throughout the circle, but despite this, we could always repel them together with the support of the Glatorian. Then the raids suddenly decreased day by day, week by week, and finally, twice every 6 months. We thought they just wanted to disturb us, even if it made us very suspicious. And that's why they sent me to see what was happening, Mazeka continued. My job was to infiltrate their base and figure out what was going on, and... Did you go alone? Oniwa interrupted. No. A Komator named Tarin accompanied me on the mission. He was an old friend, but also a skilled spy. Only Matanui knows where he is now. What happened to him? Bonua asked. There were complications during that mission, and Terry was probably caught, but I'm not sure. However, on that expedition, Medzeka told us that a group of suspicious individuals were in the throne room that once belonged to the Shadowed One. Then Terry suddenly disappeared as they were coming off of the passageway beneath the snowy mountains. And then, one day, the unpredictable happened, Medzeka said. Yes, Toptut continued. One night, the whole planet was attacked. Monstrous creatures settled the villages that our people barely tried to defend. I found myself at the forefront of Tionui along with Arie, who was commanding the rifleman units. We tried to kill those supernatural monsters with every mean, but they were almost impossible to shoot down. We couldn't repel them. Once the city had been evacuated, we withdrew to Tazara, where we met Orcam. After a few hours, however, the enemy reached us and Tazara was devoured by the battle. Entire houses were destroyed. People and families were brutally killed, until at some point, amid the flames, I saw a figure with white armor advancing toward me. Somehow it tried to weaken me telepathically, but likely I can defend myself against mental attacks. This creature, they say, can induce anyone to suicide only with its gaze. How did it end? Asked Wenwa. Unfortunately, the assault continued for several days and we were forced to retreat to Wanui, where after many hours we managed to repel them with the help of the Order's army. After a few days, we returned to the villages, but they were destroyed. So, the rebuilding began. And then, after a few months, we found ourselves here, as thousands of years ago, inside this gigantic robot, Matzik interrupted. Wait, what? Onuwa said, frightened. Didn't you even notice that? Have you forgotten the immigrations within the robot at the behest of Eriks and Dume? Are you joking, Topduk? I don't remember anything! Wenua, haven't you asked yourself any questions about the change of some landscape from how you remember them? Madzika stunned. It must have been because of the years that had passed! I can't believe we're still inside the hideous monster that nearly destroyed Barra Magna. Yet, after hundreds of years, everything returned to the way it was before. The exalted paradise of Spirits Magna was abandoned forever. It was like everything went back in time. But who was responsible for this, and how did he do that? This is absurd! Wenua, we must— Wait, Tall Stone! Mazika grabbed his arm. There is one last thing you need to know, and I fear you won't like it.